Good evening. This is Pastor Larry Enriquez, and this is post-Easter. I hope you had a wonderful resurrection, I want to say Lenten period, the whole 40 days, not including Sundays, but certainly I hope you had a wonderful Easter Sunday. We're here now right after our celebration of the resurrection of Jesus and commemorating his death. And I'm thinking, what's important for us to see here as we go forward, teaching the Word of God and hopefully being inspired by the Lord's Word and having lives that continue to change and transform into his image. I hope that that's happening for all of us as we work along with the Lord to do that work in our hearts. So I want to read to you out of Mark because we've been traveling through Mark, marching through Mark, and so we're going to get back to that where I want to say some things to you out of Mark chapter 3. So let me read this passage to you, and then I'm going to share some things about names and then get back to the point of this. So let's do that together, okay? Here's Mark 3. Then Jesus asked them, this is starting in verse 5, he's asking his asking the religious people there, the Pharisees, who are complaining about his doing good things on religious days where they're to not be working, etc. And so he said, then Jesus asked them, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save a life or to kill? But they remained silent. They're just caught in their self-righteousness and their satanic inspired desire to kill Jesus at this point. So they have hard hearts. They're not pliable anymore. They're not listening to God, or certainly not listening to Jesus, but only their agendas, which didn't include the kind of Jesus that he was, the kind of Messiah that he was. They wanted their kind of Messiah. It always reminds me about having our own agendas and trying to make Jesus into our image, but let's let Christ be who he is, because that ain't going to change. We'll just be in conflict and be miserable, because the Lord is who he is. He says that Jesus looked around them, and he was angry, and he was deeply distressed, because he saw the stubborn hearts that they were. And he said to the man who had the withered hand, and they were seeing, is he going to really heal him on the Sabbath day? Stretch out your hand. He stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. Then the Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus. And I've shared this passage before, but we have a governmental ruling party, the Herodians, and we have the religious ruling party, and they wanted together, conspire to kill Jesus because he didn't fit their agenda. And then we'll read this part. Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the lake. A large crowd from Galilee followed. Now I'm going to read Judea, Jerusalem, Idumea, Jordan, Tyre, Sidon. These regions, some were Jewish and some were not. We have a real big mixture of a large crowd of people now following Jesus because, frankly, he was spectacular. But Jesus wasn't looking for this spectacular wanting crowd. He wanted the crowd who wanted to see why those very things were done, the spectacular, because it was pointing to him as their Messiah and the Father is the one who sent him. They were signs for them to see Jesus, but their hearts were hardened. They had their own agenda, and that didn't happen well. So here's what it says. Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the lake, and a large crowd from Galilee followed. When they heard about all that was doing, many people came to him from Judea, Jerusalem, Idumea, and the regions across the Jordan around Tyre and Sidon. Because of the crowds, he told his disciples to have a small boat ready for him to keep the people from crowding him. They were dangerously large, for he had healed many. so that those with diseases were pushing forward to touch him. Now, I want to remind you, certainly at least from the gospel according to John, it says these signs and many others Jesus did that weren't written down for us. Many things happen to the good that we're not reading, but we know were done. And that's why these crowds are so large. Whenever the impure spirits saw him, that is, demonic spirits saw him, they would fall down before him and they would cry out, "You are the Son of God." But he gave them strict orders not to tell others about him. So then Jesus appoints the 12. Now let me read this to you. Jesus went on to the mountainside and called to him those he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12, and that they might be with him, and that he might send them out to preach and to have authority to drive out demons. These are the 12 he appointed: Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter; James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, to them he gave the name Boanerges, which means sons of thunder; Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. Now, these are the things, these are the names that we'll read throughout the scriptures, but it also reminds us how important it is to have a name. And that seems maybe superfluous for me to say, but I'm just going to say that though we take it for granted that we're named, that our names have value and they're important. And they've all had different values at different times of history, but they all have a great measure of importance. I have 9 grandchildren. We happen to be taking them for my wife's birthday today to the Pirates Dinner Adventure, and I can name each one of my grandkids. And each one of my kids who are going with us as well, and my mother, we all have names, and I'll just focus on my grandkids, that those 9 little names were not taken easily. I remember the issues and the names being written on we have a blackboard, and the names are being written and erased, and they were relating names to so and so and this and that, and they're being renamed and new ones put on and taken off, and what's the name of the child, because names are important, and they're really important for us today. But if I can, in the ancient world, naming was a profound act of defining someone's existence, of defining someone's essence or social identity. It just was part of the naming of a person back in that first century, and in the ancient days, way even before, and that the name had a purpose. It literally had a standing, or it had a devotion to a religious composite of the family and history. A name was considered to have some degree of power, and you didn't give out your name readily, because essentially you were giving someone some amount of power to have your name to be done with as they would choose. There were deep meanings to names, and parents seemed to name their children according to, again, the depth of what was happening in their lives at the time, or historically, or what it could. Sometimes there weren't good names. There were names that had to do with some kind of suffering, some kind of pain. But names were important. Again, I don't want to say that names were important in the ancient days and not so important now. They are important today. In the ancient days, again, they're related to a different kind of meaning, but in today's world, we choose names and they're based on popularity, what sounds good, and of course, what sounds good now changes. Now it's personal appeal or what you relate that name to. Maybe we relate that name to some figure that we read or saw on TV or what have you. I remember saying, naming one of my first child is Luke. That's his name, and I love the name Luke because it's a biblical name that meant a bringer of light, and that I would pray and trust that God would make him that very kind of man. And I think he is that kind of man, and he still will develop into being that kind of man. But most people, who I would introduce my son to or say, this is my son, Luke, they would always reference Luke Skywalker because that was the cultural thing. I had nothing to do with Luke Skywalker. I think he came after his birth, but nonetheless, it was what sounded good and cool because of Luke Skywalker, this figure, this movie figure that came from a story. Point is that what it meant to me didn't what it meant to the bulk of the people who heard the name. There was always that little, Luke, I'm your father. That whole thing would go on. So, but there's always a meaning behind a name. But that's important for us to understand because I think names mean something to the Lord. Not necessarily the one that we give each other or that a parent gives a child, but the name you have before God. But again, to that idea, because some people say, well, our names don't mean what they used to mean. Well, that may be true, but they still have great meaning today. I mean, that's why we have people like this. Here's just I looked up just before I came on air, these various names. I kind of wrote in there, names of celebrities, or original names of celebrities that have been changed because of, being a celebrity. So Olivia Wilde, her original name was Olivia Coburn or Cockburn. So she changed it to Olivia Wilde. And why she changed that isn't a big deal, but it had to do with a novelist. Okay, Bruno Mars, his real name is Peter Gene Hernandez. So he changed his name to Bruno Mars because it had a different appeal. Katy Perry was Catherine Hudson. Natalie Portman was Netta Lee Hirschlag. Demetria Jean Guinness. Who is that? Demetria Jean Guinness. That's Demi Moore. Joaquin Raphael Bottom. He changed his name to Joaquin Phoenix. Jamie Foxx was Eric Marlon Bishop. Lady Gaga was Stephanie Joanne Angelina Germanotta. Lady Gaga just had a different ring. John Legend was John Roger Stevens. John Wayne was Marion Robert Morrison. Marion Morrison had to change that name to John Wayne because names have meaning. They have some sense about something. They give somebody an advantage and ultimately an identity. All these names have an identity. Your name has an identity. In this life, whatever you do, sometimes it's hitched up to your identity. If I were to ask you, in fact, I'm going to ask you now, what is your identity? You might say something to me about what you do or what you did. And that is what you've done or what you did, but it isn't necessarily your identity. In this life, I don't want to make it about me, but I just want to give an example. I've worn many hats. I've been married a long time, and as I'm older now, I look back and go, I've done a lot of different things by the grace of God. I was a shipping and receiving clerk in my early days. I was a tennis player in my early days. I was a ball player in my early days. I You know, I was a carpenter in my early days. So what happened when I left the carpentry business? When my identity was I'm Lawrence. That's my real name, Lawrence. By the way, the name Lawrence means victorious. So I like that, and I try to hang on to that meaning. I did different things, and I went to school, and I got a degree here, and I got certified here and there, and it's like I had a police chaplain hat, and I had I'm a certified biblical counselor hat, or I have a pastoral hat, I have a Christian studies hat, I have going on. I was in politics for a little bit, this and that. The point is that if my identity was in the things that I was doing, I would be a wreck. Who am I? Am I this? Am I that? Who am I? If it's according to what I've done, then I'm a wreck. Maybe it's easier for you because you said I've done this my whole life. I'm a teacher. I'm a printer. I'm a this. So, okay, all that to say that names mean something. What we do means something. But what really matters is your identity. And when Jesus takes his disciples aside, he's not just giving them names. He's giving them identity. He's saying, as he names them, you belong to me, and I name you. And by naming you, you belong to me. In the midst of this crowd of people, in the midst of this dangerously large crowd, and all that's going on, all the healing and all the spectacular, Jesus takes them aside in the quiet and says, this is your name. That they don't get lost in the identity that the world wants to give them or him, but the identity comes from the heart of God as to who we are. In John 10:14, Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. That's about identity. That's about me belonging to Jesus. Who are you, Larry? Who are you out there? Who are you, John, Carolyn, Bill, Frank, Lisa? Who are you? You belong to God. You're his. He knows you by name. He's the shepherd and you're the sheep. But he knows you by name, not just that you're one of the sheep, because the Bible is very clear. Here's what it says in Revelations 2:17. Whoever has ears, let him hear what the Spirit says to the church, what the church is. To the one who is victorious, I will give some of the hidden manna. I will also give that person a white stone with a new name written on it, known only to the one who receives it. It's talking about the believer, and it says that your name, my name, is written on a white stone and is personal from God to you. I don't understand that or what that is or what that looks like, but it's talking about identity, your identity and my identity to the God who saves us, because victorious we will be because God's our victory, because Jesus the Son rose from the dead, as we continue to celebrate that our whole lives is the center point of our convictions. Excuse me. Ephesians 2:10 says, for we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. And it says, for we are God's handiwork, poema in the Greek. And you've heard this before. I'm sure I've said it before. Other teachers have said it because it's what it says in the Greek. It says that we are God's handiwork. We are God's poem. Me as a person, you as a person. You know, when we're talking to somebody who's struggling with their identity, we have to help them see what's true. God says that you're, sometimes when you work with elderly people, they're struggling with their identity because they've lost the punch they used to have. They've lost the mark they used to make, and now they're more sedate. They're more given to the acts of other people in their lives. They're restricted, and they feel bad about their. And when I say feel bad, I don't mean that flippantly. I mean there is this real internal sense of the loss of influence and meaning in their lives as friends have passed on, as relatives have passed on, and here they are, and what meaning do we have? What influence do we have? But they are God's workmanship. They are God's poem, and we have to help them see what we need to see for ourselves as well. That we're it. That your very existence is God's handiwork, His poem, to be in connection, to be in relationship, primarily with Him and with each other. You are God's, and He stamps on your forehead that name that says you belong to Him. You're God's handiwork. You're God's poem. In Isaiah 49:15 and 16, it says, "Can a mother forget the baby at her breast and give no compassion on the child she has born? Though she may forget, I will not forget you. See, I have engraved you on the palms of my hands." You belong to God. You are to know Him and to enjoy Him forever. God has made you as His handiwork and poem in order to connect and be in relationship with Him. In Luke 10:19 and 21, it says, "Look, I've given you authority over all the power of the enemy." As He speaks to His disciples after they're understanding better, they're influenced by the Spirit that's with them and will be in them. "And you can walk among snakes and scorpions and crush them. Nothing will injure you if that's what God chooses to happen on that day. But don't rejoice because evil spirits obey you, because maybe one day they won't. Rejoice because your names are written in heaven." Maybe the better rendering is registered in heaven. You're already in heaven. It's legal in heaven. That's where your name is. That's to who and where you belong. We belong to Jesus. And that's our identity. Work that out in your life. What it means to be His. Whatever names you owns you. Whatever gives you identity owns you. May we get back to that very first and vital commandment. May it be only the God who you give your life to, the one and only. May you love Him above all else and all other things, so that by and through Him you have identity. So as Jesus, in the midst of this very bustling, dangerous crowd, takes His disciples away and names them, He names you, and He names me, and we too, in the midst of a very, very dangerous world that wants to rob you of your identity to God and name you itself to belong to the world. Jesus says, no, you belong to me. Be owned by God. And may your identity be there. And may you flourish. So that whatever happens, no one can take that away. You belong to Him. He loves you. He died for you. He rose from the grave for you. God bless you. Go in peace. We'll see you this Sunday.